Welcome back, or welcome to, not sure where you are on the whole viewing of Nain shorts, but this is it. Before we continue, Physique Magnifique, great place to be, great place, especially for the New Year's. Oh yeah, by the way, Happy New Year's, because we completely forgot to do that in our last video, but we're doing it now.
Happy New Year. We did forget. His fault.
You know, we usually ramble on and we kind of forget why we even started the whole thing to begin with. But here we are again in Physique Magnifique, a great place to be, the home of the bladed mind. And hopefully, if you're in the area, you come by and you check out the facilities. Maybe you find something that you really, really like in this family-oriented gym and become part of our family. But enough of that. Today, I want to talk about history. Right? And more importantly, your personal history. Because whether we intend to, whether we acknowledge it, whether we have any semblance of how much it affects us or not, that very history does interfere or sometimes help with our current studies. In other words, what is it that you know or don't know, and how much of that actually comes out while you're having class? Now, for me specifically, I've always had a love for knives. I've always had a fascination with them. Something about a blade that's just always drawn to me. And I've had knives for as long as I can remember, and a crazy aunt who kind of encouraged that love since I was very little. So I've been around them. I've cut myself numerous times. I love playing with them. I love doing different things with them. So that was something I brought with me into my training in FMA, which is, as you may know, very blade oriented, or at least the one that I trained in is very blade oriented, primarily because you're more likely to come across one of these than you are a sword. Check the last Nain short to see what I mean by sword and whatnot. Different topic altogether. But the point is that love, that baggage that I brought with me, that history with me and knives and the times I've bled and woke up in the morning and wondered, where the hell did that cut come from? Because anyone who's ever played with knives or who plays with knives on a regular basis, I'm sure you've had this before. You wake up and you realize that you don't remember how you cut yourself. But the cut is there. Especially now with hand sanitizer, it really, really sucks to find out you have a cut you weren't aware of when it starts burning. But that love helped me in really diving into my art itself. It pushed me to learn more and to understand really what it is that I'm doing with that knife. How simplistic it is, but then the versatility of it because of its simplicity. So these movements from stick to sword to knife became that much easier to adapt to. It really helped in doing so. But what came with that was also a very unrealistic and Hollywood primarily based version of what martial arts should be. And that wasn't as helpful. It was really fun to figure out the differences from reality versus fiction and to kind of bridge the gap over time to see, oh, I can see where that exaggeration came from. I can see why people say it this way. They blew it completely out of proportion. This one very simple science-based idea or movement or concept that I've been learning in martial arts. So it's fun to see it that way, but how it hindered me was I spent the first 2-3 years going through this mentality that I had to repeat things hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times to get better at it. And to some degree there is a repetition that needs to happen for you to get better, to develop skills, to get sharper at things, definitely. But in comparison to after after that, when I started really paying attention to the concepts and the ideas that were being taught to me, that learning curve went from slow rise to a quick, sharp leap upwards. And in that sense, that mentality, that old school idea, those training monologue or montages rather that I saw in movies was what I was emulating. I know it sounds silly, but this is the reality of what I went through. I'd have blisters on my hands. I was bloody knuckled and all these other things, and it was a lot of fun, but ultimately I was practicing the wrong things. And once that becomes a habit in your motor function, then it's a lot harder to unlearn, a lot harder to take away and repurpose it or refurnish it into something more productive or something that's going to elevate your skill set even more so. Now, I've talked about the idea of understanding, and that's not what this video is really about. It really is for each individual to take into account, hopefully, what it is that they know, the history behind what they know, all the information that they have in their head, and whether or not that information plays a positive or a negative role in what you're learning next. Because it is unfortunate that there are some people, and I've met some people that I've trained with, that they're there for, say, a seminar or a class in a new art or a different variation of the same art. And the moment they are shown something, the very first thing they say is, oh, this is how we learned it back in this school or back with this teacher. This is how we see it and how we do it. And it's all well and good. And it's not that it's bad information or it's not something that could or should be used. But is it necessary in that moment? Are you capable of separating that information and truly, as the saying goes, empty your cup enough to understand the process that's being showed to you now? Now, the bladed mind isn't the only art that I've trained in, the only art that I am training in, or that I will ever train in. There are many other arts that I will dive into, that I will learn as much as I can in the time that I have. That's my personal preference, my personal journey, something that I aspire to. But here's the thing. The moment that I start letting everything that I know now hinder me from understanding what's being shown to me in the future, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, I am no longer the good student that I think I am. Now I want to say that again. I am no longer the good student that I think I am. I consider myself a white belt. I love the motto, always a student. But the moment I let what I know keep me from continuing that, from living that reality, then I'm not. And it's a slippery slope because the stuff that we know is good stuff. There's no discrediting it. We've put the effort in, we put the time, we put the understanding, and it's something we should be proud of. But again, that being proud of something and then being prideful of it, those are two very different things in my personal understanding and opinion. So I think it's definitely something that we need to consider of how much of it is actually affecting us and whether that's a positive or a negative thing. Can we literally go into a class saying we know nothing? Oh, I remember Hanchi telling us a story. I forget the names because I'm terrible with names, and this was years ago. But Hanchi, Bruce Chutnick, mentioned a story about a man in his, I think it was 60 or 70. And somebody younger questioned him, was like, hey, you know, because he wasn't teaching the class. He was part of the class itself. He was a student at his old age, and a grand master from what I understand. And he was asked by this kid, kind of arrogantly, I was like, oh, how long have you been in the martial arts? Like checking his credentials because of how old he was. And then the man said, oh, I'm a new student. I've only been practicing for 50 years. And that story always stuck with me because, one, he definitely was giving that guy shit because, well, who's he to question his validity or why he was even in that class taking it? First of all, young versus old mentality, right? That's, I think, a very, very obvious distinction between the two in that little story. But for me, I took it as more of a positive in the sense that here's this guy in his 60s and his 70s who's been training in an art for decades, but is still willing to say that he is a new student, that he is willing to set all that aside, stand on the mat with white belts and underbelts of all kinds, and take in a new lesson. Separate himself from what he knows, which he knew a lot. Dude, 50 decades of training? Come on. You know your shit by then. But to set that completely aside and be able to really acknowledge what's being said, really try to understand the process. Because here's one thing that I've come across in the various arts that I've had the pleasure of dipping my toes into. We may not understand it up front. And our first gut reaction may be, oh, that's crap. And of course, respectfully, we wouldn't say it out loud, but we think it. We definitely have thought it. I have thought it. But I no longer do. And the reason because is I'm starting to see that there is more than what is shown. And if we don't take the time to consider all that's behind it, including the process that got that person to where they are, then we're never really going to understand that lesson. And we're definitely not going to see enough of it to say, I get it. Especially if the very first thing we do is compare it next to what we know. You were shown one technique out of 50 decades of learning and training. And based on that one technique, you judge the entire system or that particular instructor because you're comparing it to the thing you know best. Of course, it's not going to be the same because you know this one thing. You don't know this other thing. And to allow that to hinder your ability to take in new information, well, I don't know if that's the best approach. If it works for you, great. By all means, continue doing it. For me, it's been beaten out of me. To put it as plainly as I can. Because for me, it was arrogance that kept me that way. So that baggage of what I knew and I didn't know, because I didn't know a lot in the martial arts, it was easy for me to set that aside. Because here is real practitioners showing me something which, one, I'm in awe of and very excited to learn it. And believe it or not, if you watch these episodes, you'll see that resurface over and over again. I rekindle that fire and that passion to learn something new that I have nothing about and enjoy it at a different level. Even if it's something I know I would never use. But learning it, that has a meaning within itself, and in able to learn it better, I have to empty my cup. I don't throw it away. Maybe I just get another cup. And I start filling all these cups, and eventually I start filling an entire basin with all this different information, one cup at a time. Now that's baggage of knowledge that we bring with us, and sometimes it hurts our learning process. Sometimes it helps our learning process. But that's not the only kind of things that we bring into the classroom. Because knowing yourself becomes a very important thing in the martial arts. And for me, learning about myself, I did so through training in the martial arts. And part of that was figuring out what issues of myself that were keeping me from actually advancing. Self-doubt, overly critical, believing that I always had something to correct. And to an extent, I still believe that that is true. There is always more to learn. There's always more to refine. There's always a deeper level to understand. I honestly believe that. But when that idea overshadows all your accomplishments, even the little ones, well, then that's hindering your growth. Half of you isn't growing. Not to mention the other issues that most of us have, which is probably ADD or some sort of spectral disorder, because martial artists are very, very odd people, or at least the ones I've met. And I know I myself am very, very, very odd. And I often go to train to escape the issues I have outside of class. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's therapeutic for me. It really is. I just had a class earlier today. I feel great. I have a few boo-boos here and there, and they hurt. But nothing to cry about. I could complain about it, but there's no point because I had so much fun. Whatever stress I had was gone. Not that I had too much of it to begin with, but there have been times in my past where I'm just livid, just pissed off at the world, just have want nothing to do with anybody. Loved ones, children, I'm just mad at everybody. I just want to just break everything down. And guess what? It sometimes came out when I was training. All of a sudden, I was punching a little harder. All of a sudden, I started getting more and more frustrated with whatever exercise we were doing, and I was hitting harder. I was moving faster. I was going for real painful things, which it didn't work out for me because I ended up getting my ass kicked for real because I kind of crossed that line. But my teacher has enough control where, yeah, it was a teachable moment. It was a learning experience. But I extend this question to the rest of you. Have you had those moments where you went a little too far because of how you felt outside of class and what you brought into class when you did? Have you had a fellow student, maybe even a teacher, cause you harm because they couldn't check their emotions at the door, because they couldn't let go of whatever was happening outside of that, and it affected the way that they did their class, the way that they learned, or the way that they taught? Now, I've heard various stories that resemble this example, where there have been people who have been injured, where relationships have even been dismantled because one or two of the people involved were incapable of separating that, their emotional state, the way that they're dealing with things, and they brought it out on the mat. I mean, granted, your knowledge holding you from learning something new, that's one thing, but your attitude causing harm in a class, well, that's going to hit the brakes on any learning process whatsoever. Not to mention the trust that you lose from somebody that wants to learn from you, or from you losing trust in someone you want to learn from, or somebody you enjoy training with. All the baggage that we carry with us, whether it's the things we've experienced or the emotional state that we're in, can be very helpful if directed properly. My fear of getting hurt led me to martial arts. My need for guidance led me to my teachers. My desire to be able to protect my family has kept me working and training long after class hours are done. But my insecurities, my arrogance, my sense of knowledge, truthful or otherwise, has many times in the past kept me from achieving those other goals or those other reasons behind it. Now, I'm not saying that it takes bravery to acknowledge these things. I'm not saying that I fall into any sort of category in reference to that. It's just me sharing what it is that I experienced, and whether or not one of you, if not many of you, have experienced these things. How have you overcome them? Who was it that allowed you to really see in that mirror and say, holy crap, something needs to change? Have we forgotten to be thankful to these people and saying, hey, you really got me through a tough time. You're an asshole now and I don't want anything to do with you, but you got me to a certain point and it was able to grow from that. There's so many stories to be had, and yours may be far more tragic than mine. Who knows? Maybe it's less. I just hope that you keep on learning, you keep on pushing, and you do it in the right mindset so you don't hurt yourself or anyone else. And we can continue this journey together into the martial arts and see where the hell it leads us. So, till we find out, thank you for joining me on another one of Nain's shorts. Like and subscribe, notification button, share with your friends. The numbers do help people, they really do. So sign in to YouTube and just please do it. It doesn't take much, it's not going to cost you anything, it's free. But it does help us a whole lot into being able to keep this going. So again, Happy New Year. Welcome to another wonderful year of opportunity in training. To the next one. 3, 2, 1.